She was just a woman running from her past, and he was the monster everyone feared. But when fate forced their worlds to collide, love bloomed in the unlikeliest place, between blood and bullets, pain and redemption. Yet in a world ruled by betrayal, even love has a price, and hers might be the life of the man she swore she'd never fall for. In a city drowning in secrets, a wounded mafia boss finds his salvation in the arms of the very woman he once destroyed, until a ghost from his past returns to finish what he started. This isn't just a love story. It's a war between forgiveness and vengeance, between the heart and the gun. One of them won't survive the ending. The night was calm, the kind that makes the world seem quieter than it truly is. Los Angeles lights shimmered in the distance like fallen stars scattered on the earth. Inside a glass-walled mansion on the hills, Isabella Carter sat alone beside her king-sized bed. Her husband's side of the bed was perfectly made, untouched for weeks. She ran her fingers over the pillow, her heart sinking at the emptiness beside her. Ethan was a name she loved once, a man she believed would never leave her lonely. But love fades when distance grows roots too deep to cut. And Ethan, he lived thousands of miles away, drowning in his world of business meetings and billion-dollar deals. Isabella stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her brown hair fell gently over her shoulders, her eyes soft but heavy with silence. She wasn't the glamorous type her husband once bragged about at parties. She was simple, tender, someone who gave too much and got too little. The clock blinked 11:48 p.m. Her phone buzzed with another work text from Ethan. "Busy. We'll call tomorrow." That was the same message for 7 nights straight. She stared at it for a long moment before setting the phone down. Something inside her cracked. That ache for attention, the longing to feel seen, loved, wanted. She walked to the wardrobe, her heart beating fast. There, hanging behind her dresses, was a red bikini, something she bought months ago but never wore. She held it against her skin, smiling shyly at her reflection. "Maybe he'll notice me this time," she whispered. Her pulse quickened. She slipped into it, the silk fabric hugging her softly, revealing just enough to tease but not too much to shame. The dim light of the room painted her in gold. She lifted her phone, angled it just right, and clicked a selfie. Her smile was gentle, her eyes innocent, her heart full of hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt alive. She typed a small caption, "Thinking of you," and pressed send. A single heartbeat later, she realized something wasn't right. The message didn't say, "Delivered to Ethan." Instead, it showed a number she didn't recognize. Her chest tightened. "Oh no, no, no," she gasped. She checked again, her fingers trembling. She had mistyped 1 digit in Ethan's number. She tried to delete it, but it was too late. The message was gone, sent into the digital void, to someone she didn't even know. She sat there frozen, panic rising. What if it was a stranger? What if they replied? Minutes passed, no response. She exhaled shakily, pressing her palms against her forehead. "Maybe they'll just ignore it," she whispered. But deep down, something felt wrong. Miles away in a dark penthouse overlooking the city's underworld, a phone buzzed on a mahogany desk. A hand, strong and veined, reached for it. Lorenzo De Luca, known as the Ghost King of the West, looked at the screen. Unknown number, 1 message. He tapped it lazily, and then time stopped. A picture filled the screen. A young woman in red, with eyes full of softness and a shy smile that could melt steel. For a man used to blood, betrayal, and power, the image was disarming. He leaned back, staring at it, the glow of the phone reflecting in his blue eyes. His mind went blank. For once, it wasn't about lust or control. It was something else. Something he hadn't felt since he was a boy with dreams before the Mafia swallowed him whole. He zoomed in slightly. Every detail, the curl of her lips, the innocence in her gaze, the faint nervousness in her pose, pulled him deeper. He whispered to himself, "Who are you?" His second in command, Marco, stepped inside. "Boss, we got news from the docks. Shipment delayed." Lorenzo didn't answer. He was still staring at the photo like a man hypnotized. Marco frowned. "Boss?" Lorenzo slowly turned the phone toward him. Marco's eyes widened. Beautiful. Who is she?" "That's what I intend to find out," Lorenzo said quietly. Marco chuckled nervously. "You serious? It's just some girl who probably sent it by mistake." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "Nothing is a mistake when it finds me." His tone sent chills through the room. He stood up, walked to the glass window overlooking the neon city. Rain began to fall softly outside, streaking the glass like tears from heaven. He couldn't look away from that picture. Something about it felt like destiny had knocked on his door disguised as an accident. Meanwhile, Isabella sat on her bed, still pacing, biting her lip. She checked her phone again. No reply. "Okay, maybe it's fine," she whispered, convincing herself. She turned off the light and curled under her blanket, trying to calm her heartbeat. But she couldn't sleep. Her mind played scenarios over and over. What if Ethan finally replied? What if the stranger saw it? Her thoughts tangled like storm clouds in her chest. Across the city, Lorenzo poured himself a glass of whiskey. The ice clinked softly, echoing the rhythm of his thoughts. His men were talking about business. But he heard none of it. His world was now divided, before that message and after. He sat back in his leather chair, phone still glowing beside him. The image haunted him like a memory he never lived. He whispered again, "Who are you, Red Angel?" The nickname rolled off his tongue like a secret vow. He wasn't a man who chased women. Women chased him, out of fear or fascination. But this was different. This woman didn't even know she'd caught the devil's eye. He opened his laptop, pulling up his encrypted network. "Marco," he said, his voice suddenly firm, "trace this number." Marco blinked. "You serious, boss? Over one picture?" Lorenzo looked at him with those cold blue eyes. "Over the only thing that's made me feel in years." The room fell silent. The sound of rain grew louder and thunder rolled somewhere far off. Lorenzo's men exchanged glances. They'd seen him furious, violent, ruthless. But never like this. Never quiet, never intrigued. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling through the dim light. His expression softened, just for a moment. He didn't understand it yet, but that single accidental message had awakened something buried deep. Something human. Isabella finally drifted to sleep, unaware that her simple act of longing had changed everything. She had no idea that a man like Lorenzo De Luca now had her picture saved, her number traced, her fate sealed. Outside her mansion, the night wind whispered through the trees as if carrying a warning she couldn't hear. Lorenzo's phone buzzed again. Marco's voice on the line. "Boss, we found her." Lorenzo's heart beat once, heavy and slow. He looked out the window. Rain dripping down the glass like liquid fire. He spoke softly with deadly calm. "Find her. I want everything about her. Now." Lorenzo's order echoed through the dark penthouse as lightning flashed across the sky. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Isabella Carter slept peacefully, unaware that the most dangerous man in America had just set his world on fire for her. Rain kept falling over Los Angeles, tracing silver rivers down glass towers and narrow alleys. The city never really slept. It only changed its mask. And somewhere high above the wet streets, inside a dimly lit penthouse, Lorenzo De Luca stood before a glowing screen, his reflection split between shadow and fire. Marco and two other men hovered nearby, eyes darting nervously between multiple monitors. Lines of code flickered, security feeds switched rapidly, gas stations, traffic cameras, store entries. The hunt had begun. Lorenzo's gaze was cold, sharp, predatory. Every time her image flashed on the screen, her smile, her innocent eyes, something flickered behind his expression. He didn't understand it, but he couldn't stop it. "Check the phone records again," he said quietly. Marco typed fast, his fingers tapping like raindrops on glass. Got it. Number's registered to a private line. Belongs to Isabella Carter. Lorenzo repeated her name under his breath, tasting it like a secret. Isabella. He leaned closer to the screen as her profile picture appeared, a formal portrait the kind wives of rich men post online. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women are born with, soft features, calm grace, eyes that carried poetry even in silence. But there was more, something lonely behind that smile, something that drew him in deeper. Address? He asked. Marco hesitated. Boss, you sure you want to go that far? She's married. Her husband… Lorenzo cut him off. I didn't ask about her husband. I asked for her address. The room went silent. Outside, thunder grumbled in the distance. Marco swallowed hard and nodded, returning to his keyboard. Yow. Lorenzo walked toward the window, staring down at the city he owned piece by piece. Power, money, fear. He had everything. Yet it all felt meaningless tonight. For the first time, he was chasing something that couldn't be bought or threatened into submission. He didn't even know why. Back across town, the sun slowly rose behind soft clouds. Inside her mansion, Isabella stirred awake. The morning air was still heavy with last night's rain, and birds whispered gently outside her window. She blinked at the sunlight slipping through the curtains, unaware that a pair of eyes had already marked her every movement. She tied her hair loosely and walked to the kitchen, her silk robe brushing softly against the floor. Coffee brewed, its scent filling the air, but it did little to fill the silence around her. She checked her phone. No call. No message from Ethan. A small sigh escaped her lips. She tried to distract herself, cleaning the already spotless counter, watering the plants, opening the windows. But there was a strange unease inside her chest today, as if someone had whispered her name from far away. At that same moment, Lorenzo's men watched her live feed on hidden monitors. Tiny, distant cameras, security systems, street posts, anything they could hack. They saw her every gesture, every sigh. Lorenzo watched too, his jaw tightening each time she smiled faintly, each time her loneliness showed through. She's innocent, Marco muttered. You sure this is worth it? Lorenzo didn't answer. His voice dropped low, dangerous. Don't use that word. Innocence doesn't survive in my world. Yet even as he said it, he felt the lie burn on his tongue. Hours passed. Isabella spent her day trying to ignore the hollow echo of her house. She painted for a while, her strokes soft and uncertain, then sat by the window with tea. The world outside seemed peaceful, but the silence carried a hidden weight. A black SUV idled 2 blocks away. Inside, one of Lorenzo's men snapped photos through a long lens. He radioed in quietly. Target located. Confirmed alone. Lorenzo's voice came through the line, low, calm, commanding. Send her something. Something she won't forget. By noon, Isabella heard the doorbell ring. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the frosted glass, she saw a delivery man holding a bouquet. She opened the door slowly. Delivery for Mrs. Carter, the man said. She nodded politely, signing the slip, and took the flowers. They were red roses, dozens of them, fresh, vibrant, glistening with dew. A tiny envelope was tucked between the stems. Her heart skipped. She opened it gently, expecting her husband's name, but the note was short, handwritten in deep black ink. Red suits you. Her breath hitched. The words pierced straight through her chest. She looked around, the quiet streets suddenly feeling too still, too empty. No one was there. She stepped outside, scanning the road. A car drove past. Children laughed somewhere down the block. But still, something felt wrong. Her fingers trembled around the bouquet. Who would send her that message? Her mind raced. Could Ethan have sent it? No. He didn't even know she wore red. And the handwriting, it didn't look like his. It was bold, sharp, almost dangerous. Inside her house, she set the roses on the table, trying to shake off the feeling. but the scent of them filled the room, clinging to her skin like a whisper she couldn't escape. She turned on the radio, letting soft jazz hum through the air, anything to drown the silence. Miles away in his penthouse, Lorenzo smirked faintly at the feed. "She got them," Marco confirmed. Lorenzo leaned back, exhaling smoke. "Good, let her wonder." Marco hesitated. "Boss, she looks scared. You sure this is how you want to play it?" Lorenzo's eyes narrowed slightly. "Fear reveals truth. I want to see what kind of woman she really is." He stood, adjusting his leather jacket, his reflection ghosting in the glass. There was a strange pull inside him, a mix of curiosity and something dangerously close to desire. He told himself it was just intrigue, just a challenge, but deep down, he already knew it wasn't. As evening fell, Isabella sat in her living room, unable to focus. Every sound made her flinch, the ticking clock, the creak of the house, even her own heartbeat. She picked up the roses again, reading the note once more. "Red suits you." It wasn't just a compliment, it was a statement. Someone had seen her, someone knew. Her skin prickled with unease. She locked the doors, drew the curtains, and whispered to herself, "It's fine. I'm fine." But her voice shook. Her reflection in the glass stared back, uncertain, frightened. She checked her phone again. Still no message from Ethan, just silence. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky turned from gold to deep gray, and streetlights blinked alive one by one. The city glowed like an electric heart, but for Isabella, the light only deepened the shadows in her chest. In the distance, down the quiet suburban road, headlights appeared. Slow, smooth, steady. The sound of tires on wet pavement echoed faintly. Inside, Isabella froze, her instincts tightening like a wire. She walked toward the window, heart pounding. Peeking through the curtain, she saw it. A sleek black car pulling up to the curb. The engine turned off. Silence. Her throat went dry. The driver's door opened with deliberate calm. A tall, broad man stepped out, dressed in a black leather jacket that clung to his muscular frame. The streetlight caught his face for only a second. Strong jaw, piercing blue eyes, wet dark hair slicked back. He looked straight at her window, and even from that distance, she felt it. An unspoken connection, raw and unsettling. It wasn't curiosity in his gaze, it was certainty. Her fingers clutched the curtain tighter, breath trembling as she whispered, "Who are you?" Outside her mansion, the black car sat like a shadow in the rain. The man didn't move. He just stared, calm and patient, like a predator who had finally found his prey. And inside, Isabella Carter's life was about to change forever, because Lorenzo De Luca had come to claim her. Morning crept in softly, painting the clouds in pale gold. The city was still half asleep, its streets washed clean from the night's rain. But inside Isabella Carter's chest, there was no peace. She hadn't slept. Not a second. The image of that black car still haunted her. The way it had stopped, the way that man had looked at her window. Even when she closed her eyes, she could still see him, standing under the streetlight, motionless and sure. Every time she tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence, her gut whispered otherwise. She sat at the kitchen counter, clutching a coffee mug with trembling fingers. The house felt too big this morning, too silent. Each sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, made her nerves tighten a little more. Her phone lay beside her, blank screen staring back. Still no message from Ethan. She typed his name, then deleted it before she could send anything. She didn't want to seem desperate, but loneliness had teeth, and it was biting deeper every day. The doorbell rang. Soft, almost polite, but sharp enough to cut through her thoughts. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she stood, her heartbeat quickening like footsteps in her ears. She walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. Through the frosted glass, she saw a tall shadow, broad shoulders, a dark silhouette, still as stone. Her pulse leapt painfully. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the doorknob. "Who is it?" she called, voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Her throat went dry. She almost turned back until a calm, deep voice replied, "You sent me something last night." Her heart stuttered. She gripped the handle, frozen. That voice. It was the same tone she'd imagined last night. Low, smooth, dangerous. Without realizing it, she opened the door halfway, and there he was. Lorenzo De Luca. Tall, built like a storm, wrapped in leather and quiet confidence. Raindrops still clung to his dark hair. His blue eyes locked onto hers with unnerving intensity, like he'd been waiting centuries just to see her up close. He gave a faint, almost teasing smile. "You sent something to me by mistake," he said. His voice carried that blend of charm and authority that made people listen even when they shouldn't. Isabella blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her face as if memorizing every detail. "That picture," he said softly, "the red one." Her breath hitched. Her knees almost buckled. She stepped back instinctively, clutching the edge of the door. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you do." His lips curved, but there was no mockery, just certainty. "It wasn't meant for me, but fate makes strange choices, doesn't it?" She stared at him, her heartbeat a drum of panic and confusion. He looked nothing like the kind of man you mistake for ordinary. Everything about him radiated danger, but there was something magnetic, too, something she couldn't name. "You shouldn't be here," she said firmly. Her voice shook slightly, but her eyes didn't waver. "You need to leave." He took one slow step forward. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" she whispered. His gaze softened, but there was fire behind it. "Because you reminded me I'm still alive." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. She didn't know how to respond. She wanted to shut the door, to scream, but something kept her frozen. Something in his eyes, in the quiet steadiness of his voice, made her pulse skip. Lorenzo's gaze flicked briefly over her house. Polished marble floors, the faint scent of lilies, the emptiness of wealth. "You live alone," he observed. "A beautiful home, but it feels lonely." Her jaw tightened. "You don't know me." He smiled faintly. "I could." That did it. She straightened her shoulders, forcing her fear down. "I'm married," she said firmly, "and whatever this is, it ends here. Stay away from me." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The morning breeze stirred her hair, carrying the faint scent of roses from yesterday's bouquet. Lorenzo's expression changed. Not anger, not amusement. Something else. Admiration, maybe. He nodded slowly, but his eyes never left hers. "I understand," he said. "But understand this too. I don't walk away easily." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He placed it gently on the edge of the door frame. "If you ever need protection, call this number." She looked down, refusing to take it. "I don't need protection." He gave a quiet chuckle, low and rough. "Everyone needs protection, Mrs. Carter. Some just don't realize it yet." Then he stepped back, his presence filling the doorway one last time before turning away. His boots echoed against the wet pavement as he walked down her path, the sound lingering like an afterthought. Isabella shut the door quickly and locked it, pressing her back against the wood. Her hands trembled. What just happened? Who was that man, really? Her mind spun with questions she didn't want answers to. She went to the window, peeking through the curtain. Lorenzo was already in his car, engine rumbling softly. Before he drove off, he looked back once, straight at her window, and for a heartbeat their eyes met again. Her chest tightened. Then he was gone. The rest of the day felt unreal. She moved through the house like a ghost, trying to convince herself it was over. Just a strange encounter, just a mistake. But the sound of his voice replayed in her mind over and over. That night, she tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw those blue eyes staring into hers. The way he said her name, the way he didn't flinch when she rejected him. Outside, the rain began again. Soft at first, then harder, like a heartbeat against the windows. She got up, walked to the curtains, and pulled them closed. The wind moaned softly through the garden. And then, something made her stop. Through the narrow gap in the curtain, she saw movement. Her stomach dropped. She pushed the fabric aside just enough to look. There, under the streetlight, the rain pouring over him, stood Lorenzo. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't afraid. He was simply standing there, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on her house. Raindrops slid down his face, glistening in the light, but he didn't move. He just stared, his expression unreadable. Half hunger, half heartbreak. Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. She whispered to herself, "Why is he still here?" Her breath fogged the glass as thunder cracked in the distance. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He just stood there watching her world from the outside, drenched but unshaken. And she couldn't decide if she was terrified or spellbound. As lightning split the night sky, Lorenzo De Luca stood unmoving in the rain, his piercing blue eyes locked on Isabella's window, not with desire, but with obsession. And inside, trembling in the dark, Isabella Carter finally understood. The danger wasn't outside her door anymore. It was already in her thoughts. The night rain had soaked the city, leaving the streets slick and silver under the moonlight. Lorenzo De Luca sat in his dimly lit office, a fortress of glass and steel that overlooked the restless lights of Los Angeles. The ash of his cigar glowed faintly as his jaw flexed with quiet rage. The memory of her voice, trembling yet firm, still echoed in his mind. "I'm married. Stay away from me." Her rejection wasn't just a wound to his pride. It was an insult carved deep into the heart of a man who had never been denied anything. Lorenzo had been feared by senators, worshipped by rivals, and obeyed by men who would kill for him without hesitation. But one woman, a soft, innocent wife with fire in her eyes, had told him no. He stared at the single photo lying on his desk. Her picture, printed from that cursed text message. Her eyes weren't seductive. They were warm, naive, full of something he didn't recognize anymore. Peace. And that peace infuriated him. "Boss," a voice came from the door. It was Marco, his second in command. "You really want to go this far for her? She's just—" Lorenzo's cold glare sliced through the air. "Finish that sentence," he warned, his tone low, dangerous. Marco swallowed his words. He knew better. Lorenzo leaned back, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. "She thinks she can ignore me," he muttered. "Let's see if she can ignore her perfect husband when he's covered in someone else's lipstick." That's when the plan began. A slow, venomous idea that crawled from his darkness. He needed someone beautiful, cunning, and heartless, someone who could tempt even the most faithful man. "Get me Scarlett," he said finally. Within hours, the woman appeared, red lips, golden curls, and a body carved for sin. She was one of Lorenzo's best weapons, used in operations that demanded both seduction and destruction. "Scarlett," Lorenzo began, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a blade. "You're going to make a man fall in love." Her smile curved wickedly. "Whose heart are we breaking this time?" "Ethan Carter," he said, tossing her a photo of Isabella's husband, tall, composed, the perfect businessman. "He's married, his wife rejected me." Scarlett's brows arched with intrigue. "Ah," she purred, "so this is personal." Lorenzo's blue eyes darkened. "Everything I do is personal." Scarlett nodded, tucking the photo into her purse. "Tell me what you want from him." "His weakness," Lorenzo replied. "Make him fall for you. Make him confess. Make him betray her." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a hiss. "Then record everything." Scarlett smirked. "Consider it done." And so, the honey trap was set. Across the country in New York, Ethan Carter sat in his office, buried in deadlines and deals. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He frowned, then answered. "Mr. Carter," came a sweet, confident voice. "This is Scarlett Monroe. I represent a luxury brand interested in a partnership. Could we discuss terms?" Ethan relaxed slightly. "Ah, of course. Send me the details." But what began as formal calls soon turned into casual conversations. A compliment slipped here. A laugh shared there. Scarlett's charm seeped through the cracks of his lonely routine. Late nights in the office became their playground. She'd call him just to check on project updates, her voice playful and teasing, and he, weary of cold hotel rooms and long-distance silence, began to enjoy the company. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Isabella tried to move on with her quiet days. She didn't know her husband's smile was slowly turning toward another woman's face, nor that Lorenzo's men still watched her, from cars parked across the street, from the cafe she visited, from the shadows of her mansion gates. Every night, Lorenzo sat in his study, sipping whiskey, watching the security feeds his men had hacked. Her routines became his obsession. Her silence became his punishment. But sometimes, late at night, his anger melted. He would stare at her image and whisper under his breath, "Why you?" He didn't understand it. The way she haunted him. The way her eyes could silence his violence. The way her rejection made him ache rather than rage. Marco entered again one evening. Boss. The girl's making progress. The husband's hooked. Lorenzo smirked. "Good. I want proof. I want her to see who she's defending." Days passed. Scarlett's trap tightened like a spider's web. Ethan, once distant, began staying up late to talk to her. They shared jokes, secrets, even dreams. He started calling her Scar, saying she made him feel young again. Scarlett played her part perfectly. A lonely businesswoman who understood him. She flirted just enough to keep him coming back, but not enough to alarm him. And when he finally confessed that he was married yet unhappy, she leaned closer to the camera and whispered, "Then maybe you deserve better." He didn't resist. Their video calls grew more intimate, his laughter softer, his tone warmer. One night, when the whiskey blurred his morals, Ethan said it, the words Scarlett was paid to capture. "I think I'm falling for you, Scarlett." And the recording light blinked red. The next morning, Lorenzo stood before a massive screen in his office as the video played. Ethan's voice filled the room, low and intoxicated with desire. Lorenzo's lips curved into a slow, merciless grin. Scarlett's voice pouted from the screen, "Oh, Ethan," followed by a faint laugh. Then came the words Lorenzo had been waiting for. Ethan's confession of love. When the video ended, silence hung in the air. Lorenzo exhaled, crushing his cigar into the ashtray. He looked up at Scarlett, who stood before him, smirking proudly. "Mission accomplished." Lorenzo turned his gaze to the window, the city gleaming below like prey waiting to be hunted. His reflection looked back at him, powerful, cruel, and satisfied. Then he whispered, almost tenderly, "Let's break her heart." That evening, Isabella received a notification on her phone, an anonymous message. Curious, she opened it, and when the video began to play, her world shattered in an instant. Ethan's face on the screen, whispering love to another woman. Her knees buckled, her breath caught, and a single tear traced down her cheek as the screen went black. The night was quiet. Too quiet for a heart that had just been broken. The mansion, usually filled with the faint hum of the city outside, now stood still like a tomb. Isabella's phone slipped from her trembling hands, clattering against the marble floor. On its glowing screen, the image froze. Ethan's face, smiling tenderly at another woman. Scarlett's laughter echoed faintly before the video ended. Her breath hitched. Her pulse thundered in her ears. For a moment, she thought she couldn't move, as if the air itself had thickened around her. Then came the tears, silent at first, then unstoppable. She sank to the floor, clutching her chest, as if to hold her breaking heart together. The pain wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. The kind of ache that comes from realizing the person you trusted most had been slowly slipping away long before you noticed. Her mind raced back to every missed call, every excuse, every "I'm busy, honey." The late-night meetings, the short replies, the fading warmth in his voice. Now it all made sense, and that understanding hurt worse than betrayal. "Why, Ethan," she whispered through her tears, voice trembling, "what did I do wrong?" The red bikini photo she had sent to rekindle love, it was supposed to be innocent, playful. Now it felt like the spark that burned her life to ashes. Her sobs echoed in the empty house, bouncing off walls that once held laughter. The chandelier's light shimmered through her tears, blurring everything around her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to disappear. But instead, she curled on the cold floor, hugging her knees as if hiding from the truth could undo it. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Rain began to fall again. Slow at first, then pouring like the heavens themselves mourned with her. Somewhere in that storm, a pair of blue eyes watched from a black car parked across the street. Lorenzo De Luca had seen many kinds of pain in his life. The pain of betrayal, the pain of loss, the pain of power. But what he saw through that window was something else, something pure. It wasn't rage or vengeance in her tears. It was heartbreak, raw and real, and somehow it twisted something inside him. He clenched his jaw, his hand gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. This wasn't what he wanted to see. He had planned this moment to humiliate her, to watch her crumble under the weight of her husband's betrayal. But instead, watching her fall apart broke something in him. The ruthless Mafia boss and the man who once ordered death like others ordered coffee sat frozen, his heart pounding in a rhythm he didn't recognize. Guilt, regret, and something dangerously close to compassion. He got out of the car before he could think twice. The rain hit his leather jacket, tracing down his face, mingling with the heat of his breath. Every step toward her door felt heavier, slower, as if fate itself tried to pull him back. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Inside, Isabella wiped her face with trembling hands, her breath coming in shallow sobs. Then, a knock, soft, measured, but deep enough to echo through her hollow heart. She froze. Another knock followed, firmer this time. Her instinct whispered to ignore it, but her loneliness screamed louder. Slowly, she stood, her bare feet moving across the cold floor. Her reflection in the hallway mirror startled her. Eyes swollen, lips quivering, hair tangled from grief. She almost didn't recognize herself. The knock came again. She hesitated, hand hovering above the door handle. "Who's there?" she asked, voice weak, barely audible. No answer, just silence, broken by the soft hiss of rain. Her heart pounded as she turned the lock and opened the door an inch. And there he was, Lorenzo, the man she had only met once, the man who frightened her more than anyone else. But tonight, he didn't look like the monster who had once stood before her with arrogance and fire. His hair was wet, plastered against his forehead. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes, weren't cold or menacing. They were calm, sad even. "Isabella?" he said softly, his voice barely rising over the rain. Her breath caught. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze moved past her shoulder, noticing the phone on the floor, the faint reflection of Ethan's face frozen on the screen. Something inside Lorenzo clenched. He hated that image, not because of the man in it, but because of the pain it caused her. He took a small step closer. "You shouldn't cry for him," he said gently. "He doesn't deserve your tears." She stared at him, disbelief flashing through her wet lashes. You sent me that video, didn't you?" Her voice shook between accusation and heartbreak. He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. Her eyes filled again, but this time not with sorrow, with anger, You wanted to hurt me." Lorenzo exhaled slowly, rain dripping from his lashes. "I wanted to remind you that he never valued you, but—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "Seeing you like this, it wasn't supposed to feel like this." She frowned, confused. "Like what?" "Wrong," he murmured. For a moment, they just stood there, the sound of rain surrounding them like a secret. Her heart was breaking, his, awakening. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded handkerchief. "Here," he said quietly. She didn't move. She just stared at him, unsure if it was kindness or manipulation. Lorenzo stepped closer, placing the handkerchief on the table by the door, careful not to cross her boundary. Then, as he turned to leave, his voice softened even more, a tone she'd never imagined he was capable of. "He doesn't deserve your tears, Isabella," he whispered, looking at her one last time. Then his lips curved faintly, the ghost of a dangerous promise in his eyes. "But I do." As Isabella stood frozen in the doorway, her heart still trembling between pain and confusion, Lorenzo walked away into the rain, leaving behind the faintest trace of warmth in the cold air. She clutched the handkerchief he'd left behind, and for the first time that night, she wasn't sure who she feared more, her husband's betrayal or the man who had just sworn to deserve her tears. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight bleeding through gray clouds. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the scent of storm, fresh, heavy, uncertain. Isabella stood by her window, clutching the handkerchief Lorenzo had left behind. She hadn't slept. Her mind replayed the night again and again, his words, his voice, that strange tenderness in his eyes. He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have cared, and yet somehow he had. Down the street, a black car sat idle, unseen behind tinted glass. Inside, Lorenzo watched from the shadows as she moved about her quiet house. His phone buzzed, Marco's voice on the other end. "Boss, are we still keeping an eye on her?" Lorenzo's gaze softened. "No," he said after a pause. "We're protecting her." He ended the call and leaned back in the seat. He didn't understand why he was still here. This wasn't supposed to be pity. It wasn't supposed to turn into this ache. He told himself it was guilt, that it was responsibility for the pain he caused. But deep down, something heavier lingered, something far more dangerous than guilt. In the days that followed, small miracles began to happen in Isabella's life. Groceries appeared at her doorstep when her fridge went empty. A repairman showed up unannounced to fix her security cameras, saying it was part of a neighborhood upgrade. A sleek SUV began parking near her street every night, never too close, but always visible, like silent reassurance that someone was watching over her. At first, Isabella thought it was coincidence. Then she realized it was him. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to tell him to stop, but each act of quiet protection softened something inside her that had long been hardened by neglect and betrayal. Her husband hadn't called since the night she saw that video. Not a single text, no explanation, no remorse, nothing. It was as if she had ceased to exist in his world. And yet, the man who once terrified her now seemed to appear only to make her feel safe. One afternoon, she walked out to the garden, the spring air brushing softly against her skin. She spotted a bouquet resting on her porch. White lilies, her favorite. No note this time, just silence. But she knew who had sent them. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "What are you doing to me, Lorenzo?" Across town, Lorenzo sat in his office, trying to bury himself in numbers and meetings. His empire, built on smuggling, blood, and fear, demanded his focus. But lately, even power had begun to taste hollow. He'd stopped attending the underground meetings. He avoided the men who spoke of violence as business. When they asked why, he only said, "Things are changing." But the truth was more complicated. Isabella Carter had done something no enemy ever could. She'd made him question himself. He remembered the first time he'd seen her on that mistaken photo. all red and sunshine. A smile too pure for the kind of man he was. He thought it was just lust then. But now, when he thought of her, it wasn't her beauty that haunted him. It was her fragility, her innocence, her strength, even when broken. He began funding a charity under a fake name. He pulled money out of illegal channels and invested in clean ventures. He ordered his men to step away from certain dirty jobs. For the first time in his life, he wanted to be someone who didn't need to hide in shadows. But redemption is never simple for a devil. Every night when the city grew quiet, guilt whispered through his thoughts like ghosts. The memory of that cruel plan, the trap he'd set for her husband, the pain he'd caused, burned in his chest. He couldn't erase it. No amount of good deeds could wash away that sin. He thought of confessing to her once, telling her everything, begging for forgiveness. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not when she was just beginning to see him as something more than a monster. One evening, as Isabella sat by her fireplace, a soft knock echoed again at her door. Her heart jumped. She knew that knock. When she opened it, Lorenzo stood there. No arrogance, no swagger, no threat, just quiet presence. "I told you not to come back," she said softly, but her voice lacked anger. "I know," he replied, his tone steady, low. "But I couldn't stay away." She studied his face, the faint lines of exhaustion, the hint of sincerity that didn't belong to the man she first met. "What do you want from me, Lorenzo?" He looked down for a moment, as if the answer shamed him. "Nothing," he said. "Just to make sure you're okay." She swallowed hard. No one had said those words to her in a long time. "Why?" she asked, almost whispering. "You barely know me." He met her eyes. Sometimes one moment is enough to know someone who changes everything. Something in her chest trembled. She stepped back, unsure, afraid of the warmth that was beginning to replace fear. "You should go." He nodded slowly, his lips tightening in a faint smile. "If you need anything, anything at all, I'll be there." And just like that, he turned and left, disappearing into the night. Isabella stood at the door long after he was gone, staring into the dark, feeling something strange stir inside her. Not love yet, but something dangerously close to it. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the neon glow of a club flickered against the rain-soaked pavement. Inside, Scarlett sat at a bar, swirling a glass of champagne. She looked stunning, lethal, and amused. Her phone buzzed. "Lorenzo De Luca," she said with a teasing smirk as she answered. "The man with a heart, after all." His tone on the other end was calm, controlled. "What do you want, Scarlett?" She leaned back, her red lips curling into a knowing smile. "You think I don't know what's going on? You're cleaning up your messes, acting like some savior. Cute. But tell me, does she know who sent her that video?" Lorenzo's silence spoke volumes. Scarlett's laughter rang like glass breaking. "Oh, I thought so." He clenched his jaw. "Don't play with me." "Oh, I'm not playing, darling," she purred. "I'm making an offer. Double my payment. Or I tell her everything. How you used me, how you destroyed her marriage, how every tear she shed had your name written on it." Lorenzo's fist slammed against the desk. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would," she said sweetly, "because men like you only pretend to have hearts. But me? I don't pretend at all." The call ended. Silence filled his office. Lorenzo stood there, his reflection in the window staring back at him, torn between the devil he'd been and the man he was trying to become. And for the first time, fear, real fear, crept into his chest. Not for himself, for her. Scarlett leaned back at the bar, smirking as she watched the message send, "TikTok, Lorenzo, 24 hours, or she learns the truth." The screen faded, her reflection glinting like fire. And somewhere across the city, Lorenzo whispered to himself, "If she ever finds out, I'll lose her forever." The night was heavy with silence. the kind that carries storms. Isabella's house stood dimly lit, shadows whispering across the walls. She moved quietly through the hallway, a cup of untouched tea cooling in her hand. Her mind was still tangled with thoughts of Lorenzo, his sudden kindness, his protection, his strange presence that made her heart race even when she tried to hate him. She didn't know if he was a guardian or a curse. The rain outside began to fall softly, tapping against the windows like a warning. Then came the sound, faint but sharp. Voices from the back of the house. She froze. Her body went still as glass. The voices grew clearer. One of them was unmistakably Lorenzo's, low, rough, and filled with frustration. The other, a woman's, smooth as poison, Scarlet. Isabella's blood ran cold. She placed her cup down gently and crept closer, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "You owe me, Lorenzo," Scarlet hissed. "You got what you wanted. She's broken, and he's gone. Now pay me double, or I'll tell her who sent that video." There was a pause. Isabella pressed herself against the wall, trembling. "You wouldn't dare," Lorenzo growled, his voice dark, but something in it sounded desperate. Scarlet laughed cruelly. "Wouldn't I? You think she'll still look at you the same way once she knows it was you who pulled the strings?" The room spun for Isabella. The teacup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Both of them turned. Lorenzo's eyes widened when he saw her standing there, pale, trembling, disbelief carved into her face. "Isabella," he began, stepping forward. "Don't," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Don't you dare say my name." She looked between them, tears gathering in her eyes as the truth unraveled piece by piece. The video, the heartbreak, the flowers, the mysterious protection. It all fit like a cruel puzzle. "It was you," she breathed out. "You did this to me." Lorenzo reached for her, voice breaking. "Isabella, I swear I didn't mean for it to—" She slapped him. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. "You destroyed my life for your obsession," she cried, her tears finally spilling over. "You watched me cry. You let me hate myself. You—" Her voice cracked. "You took everything from me." Lorenzo stood still, her handprint burning red on his cheek. For the first time, the ruthless man looked small, not powerful, not cold, just broken. He took a step closer, his voice trembling. "I only wanted to protect you from pain. I just went too far. I didn't know how else to make you see me." Isabella shook her head, stepping back from him like he was a ghost she needed to escape. "You don't protect people by destroying them, Lorenzo." Scarlet smirked, folding her arms. "Looks like your little game is over." Lorenzo turned sharply to her, fury flashing across his eyes. "Get out!" She raised an eyebrow. "Gladly, but remember, if I don't get my money—" "I said get out!" he roared. Scarlet flinched at his tone, then turned and strutted away with a cruel smile. The door slammed behind her, leaving only the sound of rain and the echo of Isabella's sobs. Lorenzo looked at her helplessly. "Please, just listen." "I listened to you once," she cut him off, voice trembling but cold, "and it ruined me. Don't come near me again." She turned away and ran upstairs, the sound of her footsteps fading as Lorenzo stood there motionless. He pressed his hand to his face where she'd struck him, the pain nothing compared to the weight in his chest. His world, once built on control and fear, was now crumbling, and it was his own doing. Outside, thunder rolled again. He stepped out into the night, the rain soaking through his shirt, washing away the warmth of everything he had begun to feel. Hours passed. The city slept, but danger never did. In a dark alley not far from Isabella's home, shadows moved, the kind of shadows that hunted men like Lorenzo De Luca. He didn't see them coming. The first blow came from behind. A pipe slammed into his ribs, sending him to his knees. Another strike hit his shoulder, then a kick to his jaw. "De Luca!" a voice growled through the storm. You thought you could run the West Coast alone, Lorenzo spat blood, glaring up despite the pain. If you're gonna kill me, he rasped, at least do it like men. They didn't. The beating continued, hard, merciless. He fought back, his fists cutting through rain and flesh, but there were too many. Finally, a knife flashed in the dark, slicing across his side. He staggered, his hand pressing against the wound, blood mixing with rainwater. The men vanished as quickly as they'd come, leaving him gasping against the cold pavement. His vision blurred, the world spinning. Somehow, through sheer will, he dragged himself up. Step by step, bleeding, broken, he stumbled through the quiet street until he reached the iron gate. Isabella's gate. He collapsed against it, his breath shallow, rain pouring down his face. Inside the house, Isabella stood by the window, unable to sleep. Her eyes were swollen, her heart still raw. And then she saw him. A shadow slumped against her gate, soaked in red and rain. For a moment she thought it was a dream, but then lightning flashed, and the sight of him made her gasp in horror. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Lorenzo," she whispered. She ran toward the door, heart racing, not knowing if the man who shattered her heart was still alive or dying right outside her gate. The wind howled outside as rain beat mercilessly against the mansion walls. Isabella's breath caught in her throat as she stood frozen at the door. Her hands trembled, the memory of his betrayal still burning in her chest. But there he was, Lorenzo, the man who ruined her life, now lying motionless against her gate, blood mingling with rain, his once powerful figure crumpled like a fallen statue. For a moment her mind screamed, "Let him suffer." But her heart betrayed her. It remembered the softness in his voice when he spoke her name, the strange way his eyes had once looked at her. Not with lust, but with something almost human. She couldn't ignore that, not tonight. She rushed out into the storm, her bare feet splashing in puddles, rain drenching her thin nightgown. "Lorenzo!" she cried, her voice breaking as she knelt beside him. His lips were pale, his breath shallow. The streetlight above flickered, casting a faint golden glow over his bloodied face. "Lorenzo, can you hear me?" she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He groaned weakly, his eyes fluttering open. For a second, those icy blue eyes met hers, dim, yet still filled with that haunting intensity. "I told you not to come near me," she said shakily, even as her hands pressed against his wound to stop the bleeding. He gave a faint, painful smirk. Didn't plan on it this time. Her tears mixed with the rain as she looked at him. This man who was supposed to be untouchable, unbreakable, now fragile and human in her arms. She didn't understand why her heart ached so much seeing him like this. "Hold on," she said urgently, her voice trembling. "Please. Lorenzo, don't you dare die here." She somehow dragged his heavy body through the gate, stumbling across the wet ground until they reached her porch. Her muscles screamed in pain, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. She laid him on the floor and pressed her hand firmly against his wound. Blood soaked through her fingers, warm and sticky. "Stay with me," she whispered, her tears falling onto his chest. "Please, don't go." He struggled to speak, his voice barely audible. "Didn't think you'd care." "Just shut up," she said, choking on a sob. "You're not dying, not like this." With shaking hands, she grabbed her phone and dialed for help. But she froze halfway through the call. The police. If they came and saw him here, they'd take him away. He was still a wanted man, a mafia boss. It could ruin her, too. Her hand dropped, and she made a decision she never thought she would. She would save him herself. She dragged him into the living room, her breath shallow, every nerve in her body screaming. She found an old first aid kit and did what she could, cleaning the wound, bandaging him, pressing her hands to his skin to keep him warm. Her fingers trembled, her mind spiraling. The smell of blood filled the air, metallic and sharp. Lorenzo's breathing steadied slightly. She sat beside him, soaked and shivering, watching the man who'd caused her so much pain lie helpless before her. Hours passed. The storm outside quieted, replaced by the slow ticking of the clock. She leaned back against the couch, exhausted, her head in her hands. When she finally looked up, Lorenzo's eyes were open. He was staring at her, weakly but clearly awake. "You should have left me," he rasped. She swallowed hard, her voice soft but trembling. "I tried, but I couldn't." He tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "Why?" Her eyes glistened. "Because I don't know how to hate you anymore." The words hung in the air like lightning before a storm. His hand trembled slightly, reaching out toward her. She hesitated but didn't pull away when his fingers brushed against hers. His touch was weak, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Not of fear, but of something far deeper. He closed his eyes, whispering hoarsely, "I don't deserve that." She looked at him. The once ruthless man, now broken and silent, stripped of his armor. "Maybe not," she said softly, "but you're still human." The night faded slowly. She stayed beside him until dawn broke through the curtains, bathing the room in soft light. Her exhaustion finally caught up to her, and she drifted into a restless sleep on the chair beside him. When she woke, the sun was bright, birds chirping faintly outside. She turned to check on Lorenzo, but the couch was empty. Panic rushed through her as she stood up quickly. The bandages, the blood, the damp towel. All signs of him were there, but he was gone. The door to the living room was open, letting in a gentle breeze. On the table lay a folded note, stained faintly with blood. Her trembling fingers opened it. In shaky handwriting it read, "You saved my life when you should have let me die. I won't forget that. Not in this life or the next." Her chest tightened as she read the last line. "Stay safe, Isabella. Even devils know how to love, but they never get to keep it." Tears welled in her eyes again as she pressed the note to her chest. She didn't know whether to feel relief or heartbreak. All she knew was that something had changed between them. Something that couldn't be undone. She looked out the window. The street was empty, the storm gone. Yet somewhere deep in her heart, she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. As she turned to close the door, a faint shadow flickered on the security monitor, a figure in black standing across the street, watching her house, and when she zoomed in, her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Lorenzo. The morning light filtered softly through Isabella's curtains, but peace was nowhere to be found. Her hands trembled as she stared at the security monitor. The figure in black stood across the street, unmoving, a dark silhouette watching her house like a predator studying its prey. Her breath hitched. For a long moment she thought it was Lorenzo returning, but as she zoomed in, the posture was different. Broader shoulders, shorter height, a stranger. Her heart began to race. Who could it be? Another one of Lorenzo's enemies? Someone sent to finish what had been started the night before? The thought made her stomach twist. She backed away from the monitor, grabbed her phone, and considered calling the police. But the fear of explaining everything froze her hand mid-air. What would she say? That the Mafia boss who once terrified her was bleeding on her carpet last night, and now another shadow was watching her house? No one would believe her. The doorbell rang. Her heart leapt into her throat. The sound echoed through the empty house, sharp and haunting. Slowly she approached the door, each step heavy with dread. The rain from the previous night still clung to the air, damp and cold. She peeked through the peephole, but no one was there. Only the faint reflection of the street lamp across the road and the echo of silence. Then, a voice from behind her. "You shouldn't open that!" Isabella spun around, gasping. Her pulse shot up as her eyes met a familiar face. Lorenzo, standing in the hallway, leaning weakly against the wall. Her heart stopped. "Lorenzo?" He looked pale, still bandaged, his shirt clinging to him with the faint stains of dried blood. His expression was serious, alert. "You're being watched," he said hoarsely. Her breath caught. "You came back?" He took a few careful steps closer. "I didn't have a choice. They found out where you live." She stared at him, trying to make sense of everything. "Who? Who's outside?" "Rival family," he muttered, glancing at the window. "They must have followed my men when they dragged me off last night. They think you know something." Fear shot through her veins. "Me, I don't know anything." Lorenzo looked at her, eyes burning with that same fierce protectiveness she'd once mistaken for obsession. "Doesn't matter. They don't care about truth, Isabella. They care about leverage." A shiver ran through her body as she hugged her arms around herself. "So what do we do now?" He sighed, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "You let me handle it." She frowned. "Handle it? You can barely stand." Lorenzo smirked faintly despite the tension. "You'd be surprised what I can do when someone I care about is in danger." Her heart stuttered. That word. Care. It wasn't one she ever expected to hear from a man like him, but the way he said it, quiet and broken, made her chest ache. Before she could respond, the sharp sound of glass shattering cut through the air. The living room window exploded inward, shards scattering across the floor. Isabella screamed and ducked as Lorenzo grabbed her, pulling her behind the couch. Gunfire followed, quick, ruthless, echoing through the house. Lorenzo's instincts kicked in. His hand reached for the pistol tucked beneath his jacket. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Through the broken window, 3 men stepped inside, all dressed in black, their faces hidden under masks. Lorenzo's voice was low, deadly calm. "Stay down." He moved like a shadow, his injured body fueled by sheer willpower. The first intruder came around the corner. Lorenzo shot him once, clean through the shoulder. The man fell with a cry. Isabella covered her ears, tears filling her eyes. She'd never seen such violence up close. The sound of bullets, the smell of gunpowder, the chaos. It all felt like a nightmare. Another man charged in. Lorenzo dodged, slammed his elbow into the attacker's jaw, then fired again. 2 down. The third man aimed toward Isabella. Her scream tore through the room. Before he could shoot, Lorenzo lunged, taking the bullet to his arm but forcing the man to the ground with brutal strength. The gun clattered away. When the fight ended, silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Lorenzo stood, panting, blood dripping down his arm. He glanced at her, his voice ragged. "You okay?" She nodded shakily. Still pressed against the floor. "You're bleeding again," she whispered. He gave a faint, exhausted smile. "It's not the first time." Her eyes softened despite herself. "Why did you come back, Lorenzo?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because I couldn't leave you alone in this world I dragged you into." Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to do this for me." "I did," he said simply. "You may hate me, but I won't let anyone hurt you. Not while I'm still breathing." Her heart twisted. She wanted to be angry, to remind him of all the pain he caused, but seeing him there, wounded, protecting her with everything he had left, made it impossible to feel anything but confusion and sorrow. As she helped him sit down, their hands brushed. His touch was warm despite the blood. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the world outside ceased to exist. It wasn't the gaze of a Mafia boss and a broken wife. It was 2 lonely souls bound by chaos and choices they couldn't undo. She whispered softly, "Why me, Lorenzo?" He leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. "Because you were light in a life full of darkness, and I didn't know what to do with that." Her heart ached at his words. She reached for the towel to press against his arm, her fingers brushing his skin gently. "You can't keep living like this," she murmured. "Always fighting, always bleeding." He gave a faint chuckle. wincing. "It's the only life I know." She looked at him, tears forming again. "Then maybe it's time to learn another one." The room fell silent. Rain started again outside, soft, steady, like the calm after a storm, but both of them knew peace was temporary. The enemies wouldn't stop, and now she was part of it. Lorenzo glanced toward the window, his voice quiet but certain. "They'll come back, stronger." She swallowed. "Then what do we do?" He turned his gaze back to her, his blue eyes fierce yet filled with something gentler than before. "Then we stop running." Isabella didn't understand what he meant at first, until he stood, despite the pain, and walked toward the window. His reflection glared back at him, a man torn between love and vengeance. He picked up his gun again, checked the chamber, and whispered almost to himself, "It's time I end this." As Isabella turned to ask what he meant, the monitor flickered, and on the screen appeared Scarlett's face, smiling coldly. "Miss me?" she said, her voice echoing through the speaker. The monitor flickered in the dim light of the living room, the sound of Scarlett's voice slicing through the heavy silence. Isabella froze, her heart pounding. Lorenzo's entire body tensed, his hand still gripping the pistol. On the screen, Scarlett's smirk widened, a predator's grin dressed in beauty. Her red lips curled as she leaned closer to the camera. "Well," she purred, her tone dripping with mockery, "isn't this sweet? The monster and his broken little angel hiding together like fugitives." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "Scarlett," he growled, his voice deep and cold. She laughed, that haunting, venomous laugh that had once made men melt and now made Isabella's skin crawl. "Oh, Lorenzo, you didn't think you could just walk away from me, did you? You owe me more than money now. You owe me blood." He stepped closer to the screen, his eyes burning. "You got what you wanted. Money. Chaos. What more could you possibly want?" Her smile faded into something darker. "You ruined my life when you tried to play hero. You think I'll let you ride off into the sunset with your little housewife here? No, Lorenzo. You took my place in the underworld. Now I'm taking yours." Isabella's breath hitched as Scarlett lifted a phone to the camera, showing a live feed of several black SUVs driving through the city streets. "My men are already on their way," Scarlett said, her voice sweet and deadly. "And this time they're not coming for you. They're coming for her." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with terror. "No," she whispered. Lorenzo turned sharply, his voice steady but his eyes fierce. "Over my dead body." Scarlett tilted her head. "That can be arranged." The screen went black. For a moment, the silence was suffocating. The air felt heavy, electric. Isabella looked at Lorenzo, her voice breaking. "What does she mean? What's happening?" He didn't answer immediately. He holstered his gun, his face grim, every muscle in his body ready for war. "She's coming for you, Isabella, not just to scare you, to destroy you. She thinks taking you away from me will break me." Her eyes filled with panic. "Then we have to run." He turned to her sharply, shaking his head. "No more running. This ends tonight." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "Lorenzo, you're still hurt. You can't fight them all." He gave a faint, tired smile. "I've been bleeding my whole life, Isabella. One more night won't kill me, but losing you might." Her throat tightened as emotion choked her. She didn't want to admit it, but the fear of losing him sliced through her like a knife. She stepped forward, grabbing his arm. "You don't have to do this alone." He looked down at her hand, then into her eyes, deep brown, filled with tears and defiance. "You've already done enough," he whispered. "You saved me once. That's more mercy than a man like me deserves." Lightning flashed outside, thunder rolling in the distance. The storm was coming again, both in the sky and in their lives. Minutes later, the rumble of engines echoed through the street. Isabella's heart leapt as she peered out the window. Black SUVs were pulling up, headlights cutting through the rain. Men in dark suits stepped out, weapons glinting beneath the streetlights. Lorenzo loaded his gun, every movement deliberate. He glanced over his shoulder. "Stay behind me." "Don't move unless I tell you." She shook her head, grabbing a kitchen knife. "I'm not hiding while they try to kill you." He almost smiled, a ghost of pride in his expression. "You're stubborn." "You taught me that," she replied, her voice trembling but firm. The front door rattled. Then came the first bang, a kick. Wood splintered under the force. Lorenzo raised his weapon, his eyes like cold fire.